Hello again. We are going through a whole series of rebroadcasting a series we started recording at the studios of METV, Bradenton, Florida, back in the early part of the last decade. We started in 2002, and now we are going up to December of 2004, and we're going to reintroduce you to a gentleman who was born June 28, 1924. I don't want to do the whole broadcast, that's what you're here to watch. But you will hear Peter Thomas mention going ashore on D-Day as an 18-year-old. And as he said to me on the phone one day, what a day to be 18 and alive. Pinned down as he and comrades were by German machine guns at Normandy Beach. This man, without question, the man you're about to see and hear, is the most listened to broadcast voice in all of radio and television history, bar none. He is also, like so many of these people we're bringing to you, a pleasure to listen to and an honor to know. I'm honored to call Peter Thomas my friend, and very happy to tell you that for a man born in 1924, the phone is still ringing every day from broadcasters and advertisers all over the country who wouldn't do a commercial without the voice of Peter Thomas. Meet him now. He's a grand human being.
Hello, I'm Don Blair. Welcome to another edition of Broadcast Biographies, brought to you under the umbrella of the Broadcast Pioneers Clubs of Florida and Sarasota County, and produced here in the studios of Channel 21 METV in Bradenton, Florida. Before I introduce you to our guest for this program, I want you to see the man that you and I have been listening to for decades, and I do mean decades. Watch this.
With the approach of winter, he began his long journey home. But perhaps the snows came early, or he lost his way. Suffering from hypothermia, the mountains got the better of him. The wind dried his body, and the glacier formed above him. The ancient kingdoms of Egypt, Greece, and Rome rose and fell. Buddha, Christ, and Mohammed lived and died.
There you have it. The voice of Peter Thomas, the voice of not every Nova episode ever made, but I would say probably most of them, Peter. Welcome to Broadcast Biographies.
Wonderful being here. Brings back memories of New York and our time together.
Yeah,
there.
we would pass bump heads in a couple of studios in New York.
That's right.
Although I must say you frequented those studios 100 times to my one, and so that's the way it goes. But I wanted to, and I've been thinking about this for as long as we've been doing these programs with various broadcast retirees living here in Florida. And knowing that you're down there in Naples and that we knew each other when I was up in Connecticut, and so were you, that your reputation, your solid gold reputation among your colleagues in the industry and advertisers all over the country, I just said, one of these days, we've got to get Peter Thomas out of that beautiful home in Naples and up here, and we've got to talk about you.
Wonderful. It's great to be
Because
here.
Peter, I don't think you would ever go around patting yourself on the back. It's up to someone like me saying, come on up, let's talk about your career.
Wonderful.
Okay?
Thank you, Don.
Some of the people we have talked to, as you might expect, might have gone through college, might have gone into a workforce, and then sometime something happened that directed them into radio and television and broadcasting and writing, whatever, music. But as we talked in the car driving up here today, you had no question very early in life about where you want to go. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I think growing up with a minister as a father who inculcated in all of his children a love of reading and memorization, I loved speaking and I loved acting, which I did at an early age, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And when radio came along, and I started out doing a thing called Dick Denny, All-American Birdman in Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola?
Pensacola.
Okay.
It's where I was born. And one thing led to another, and I just knew from the very beginning, and I must have been like 13 or 14 years of age, I knew this is what I wanted to do during my life, and it's been wonderful.
So when World War II came along, and I want to talk about that for a few moments, it wasn't like you got drafted and decided what you were going to do when the war was over. You were in it, and it pulled you away from the industry and so forth.
That's right. I enlisted the manager of the radio station, Jack Rathburn, called me in one day and said, guess what, I have a deferment for you. And that made me very upset because I was just turned 18. And we were doing work for the Navy after hours, sending signals out into the Gulf of Mexico because there were German submarines out there, and the Navy depended on these signals from the radio station. So he considered that war work. But I immediately went down to the draft board and said, when does the next bus leave for Blanding? I want to be on it. And that's when I went in the Army.
Okay. And this is ratcheting way forward into the 80s, but one of those rare times when Don Blair was going to have the opportunity of working with Peter Thomas, and that's a scary proposition because your reputation precedes you, and you're excellent, and you're clean and fast.
Thank you.
But you called me on the phone one night and you said, Don, I know we were going to get together next week in New York, but I can't be there. And I said, uh-oh, what's the matter? Illness, what's wrong? I said, is there anything wrong? And you said, no, there is nothing wrong. But you were going back to Normandy.
Right. The 50th anniversary of D-Day, and I took two of my grandchildren with me, and it was a beautiful experience. Things really hadn't changed that much as far as Omaha Beach and Normandy was concerned. It was like yesterday. 50 years had gone by. But it was a magnificent time.
The comment you made to me on the phone was, what a day to be 18 and alive.
That's right.
To get there that night.
Right.
Heaven knows what kind of conditions you slept in, but they couldn't have been like a motel.
No, and talking about being 18, that was the hardest part when we went back. We were, of course, welcomed by the French people, and they gave us a medal, the Normandy Medal, for being part of the invasion. And it was a beautiful experience until we went to the graveyard with those 10,000 crosses and Stars of David. And you look down 18, 19 years of age, and you realize how blessed you are that your life went on.
Yes.
And there's stop right there. There's great patriots.
And if I may say, how blessed broadcasting is because your life went on and
you.
goes on full blast to this day.
That's right.
And Peter Thomas is not exactly hedging away from the subject of your age. I mean, hey, if you were in Normandy on 44 and you're 18,
80 now.
Our viewers have already figured it out.
Right.
Okay, and your career is still in high gear.
Still in high gear. It's a blessing. I'm just so thankful every day that the phone rings and I'm working. I love it.
Oftentimes when we have a guest on, says, oh, well, he hosted Nova or this show or that show. And he used to do that. But you're still doing Nova.
Still doing it. Nova, History Channel, Discovery, Court TV every night.
And the latest Peter Thomas hit, and it is a big hit, Forensic Files.
Right.
On Court TV.
Court TV.
On cable.
Right.
And we will talk more about that toward the end of the program. Right now, I want to see some more of your work. And if we might, a couple of on-cameras. And after we see a little bit of this SEAL test spot, we'll take a look at it, then I want to ask you if you can recall, and I don't expect you to hit everyone on the head time-wise, but maybe what year this was for Peter Thomas.
All right.
This is SEAL test, watch.
She floats.
She's atomic.
She's the newest in atomic submarines.
Here she is, mates. The greatest two-in-one atomic sub you ever saw. She's a submarine. She's a drinking cup. And she's easy to own when you buy SEAL Test chocolate drink. Get it at the store or from your SEAL Test milkman.
Okay, a SEAL test on-camera spot.
Right.
You look a little bit different.
Yes, that was done in Philadelphia. I remember I got on the train in New York, Penn Station, went down to Philly, and we went through rehearsal on Friday night and did the show Saturday morning. Jack Sterling was the ringmaster, and what a wonderful human being.
Great CBS
Jack,
voice and on-camera
wonderful person. But I did the commercials, and before teleprompter, before color.
Yeah.
And it was on, but no going back. Once you are on camera, it was there you had it. You
And
know.
that's why we had famous bloopers like Betty Furness trying to open the refrigerator
That's right,
door.
and it didn't open.
Live
That's right.
TV, and it
That's
wouldn't
right.
open.
It wouldn't open.
What are you going to do? Okay, and just before we move on much further, I just want to look at a couple of your early spots, and these happen to be all on camera. Camera jobs. And the funny part of it is, by the time I got to know you personally and meet you in a couple of studios, probably in the 1980s in New York, I think your work was almost entirely voiceover by then, wasn't it?
Voiceover, right.
Yeah.
I gave up a lot of the on-camera because it took up too much time. An on-camera commercial you'd have to be there all day.
All day.
You know.
Yeah.
And then somebody would call and say, we need a pickup line on IBM or Coke or Esso, and you said, I can't get there till tomorrow, and you can imagine.
Oh boy.
They'd say, no, got to be today, so I gave it up.
This one is for Lux Liquid. It's not as big a deal today,
No.
but in our time,
It was.
Lux, like the Lux Radio Theater.
That's
I mean,
right.
that was big soap.
That's
Take a
right.
look. Lux Liquid.
New Lux Liquid gave Carol DeVito pretty hands. Let it do the same for you.
Change to New Lux Liquid with Dermasil.
Guaranteed to improve the appearance of your hands every time you do dishes.
And if I might, because this is so time-oriented, this is an era when you were overseas fighting for our freedom and your life and those of your comrades, and we were back home in grammar school, and we were being urged and asked to buy savings bonds. This is Peter Thomas for U.S. savings bonds, a big thing during the war. Watch.
Get higher interest than ever before, and they take less time to give you more.
Have your company save for you with the Easy Payroll Savings Plan. See how fast they mount up.
And we were back home complaining because we didn't get enough red points and blue points to buy sugar and meat, and you're in a foxhole somewhere,
Foxhole.
and
Sea
you're not
ration.
complaining about the spam and the hardtack and everything else.
That's right.
And everything else. Do you recall, Peter, when you did get out of the service? Do you remember the date and the time?
Yes, I got out of the service October the 12th, 1945. 45.
Okay, so a young man gets out in 1945, born, and I even saw it down here, 1924?
Right.
Okay.
That's good. Mhm.
There you go.
That's right.
How soon do you get back into the swing of broadcasting?
I think I was home one day and I went back to the radio station and said, I'm ready to go. And that was it. And the other thing I wanted to do was to marry Stella, because Stella was in college in Tallahassee, the Florida State College for Women. And her mother wouldn't let her get married until she graduated. So we waited until she graduated, and we got married in 1946, went to WALA in Mobile. And then I was looking for a station where I could go to college during the day and work at night. I went to WMC in Memphis, and I worked there until I went to New York when the Hamilton Watch Company heard me doing a local poetry program. And they asked me to come to New York to do it nationally, so that's when I got to New York.
Would you say that the Hamilton account really kicked you off?
That was it, because I had been sending discs. In those days, you didn't have tape, these big discs, trying to get into audition, you know, for certain things, or NBC, CBS, and they were usually rejected. And then the local jeweler, a man, A. Graves and Stewart, was very proud of this program called Dreamtime, and I was read poetry and the commercials and the little orchestra, and they heard it and they wanted. He sent them a copy of it, and they came down to Memphis and said, "We want to syndicate this show." So he said, "Could you get a better orchestra?" And I tried, but we couldn't. So then the next step was, "Would you come to New York?" And that's when I went up to do the Hamilton Watch Company in 1948. But that was my big break.
Wow! But early on, and I'm holding here, and we'll give you a nice tight shot of it on camera in a moment. An early 1950s photo. 1950s. I was probably doing the Korean bit about that time, my time in the Army, and then I got into radio in '55. But here you are on the CBS morning show in New York, and you were doing the local feed, and there was somebody named Walter Cronkite. Did the network side.
That's right. Walter was a wonderful, he still is a wonderful, wonderful guy. But he did the network feed on CBS, on the Jack Parr shows, the early morning show.
Oh, wow.
And we used to have, and Johnny Carson came on as a replacement one summer. And Dick Van Dyke came on as a replacement when Jack Parr was away. But I did the local WCBS TV feed from Grand Central Station. And Walter, of course, became anchor after Doug Edwards was relieved of the position. And he, as you know, has had a magnificent career.
Oh, absolutely. And Doug Edwards lived up in New Canaan, Connecticut. You were down in Greenwich. I was in Darien.
Right,
and,
right.
You know, so a lot of us found Connecticut a great place to commute from.
Wonder, it really was.
Yeah. But with all the work that you have done, Peter, in your time, now, you know, I was with the networks, all the radio networks at one time or another, so it was always either the New Haven Railroad or get in the car.
Right.
You didn't have to do that like some of us did. I mean, like your friend Jack Sterling was back and forth every day.
Right. I used to get the train from Greenwich at 4:40 every morning.
Oh, yeah.
And
Sterling might have been on that train.
no, Jack stayed in New York during Monday through Friday.
Right.
But
I know Frank Blair of the Today Show.
Frank called me once. There was this terrible ice storm, and all the no trains were going in. And I had gotten to know the trainmen, and they were all good friends. They even would, when I forgot to tell them I was going on vacation, they called me, "Where are you? We're holding the train."
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And I got down to the station in Stamford, and they said, "Look, there are no trains going to New York." And they said, "Wait a minute, Mickey's on the freight." They took me up to the freight train, and they said, "Hey, Mickey, can you get him in?" He said, "Okay." He said, we went in on the freight train, and he stopped outside. This one went to Penn Station instead of Grand Central State.
Sure.
And he said, "Look, I can't take you into Penn Station because," he said, I'll lose my job." He said, "But I'll let you outside, and you go across this field, jump the fence, and you can get a cab." And I did. And Frank Blair, I remember calling me. He couldn't get in. "How did you get in?"
Yeah.
I couldn't tell him.
Well, you know what Frank used to do out of Stamford, because he lived on
Chopin Point.
Chopin Point in Stamford. Well, he would get on on a mail train in the morning. Right. It was only like 2 or 3 cars, and there was one car right in back of the engine, and the guys are in there sorting the mail.
Right.
And they got a couple of folding chairs, and Frank Blair would sit there. Mike Preeley, who was the news director of WHN, an old friend of mine, and Jack Sterling. Most mornings he would come down from New Canaan and grab that thing.
Right.
And that was then that train was eliminated, and then you had to go back to with the real people.
But all these trainmen were such good friends. I mean, they'd ask him when you got on, "Do you want to sleep this morning?" We'd stop in Portchester, which was an unscheduled stop, run over and get coffee and bagels, and it was like no one would believe it. But we were all good friends.
Yeah, well, that's great stuff. Great stuff. I have a note here about hosting something on ABC on camera. What was that all about?
That was a religious program that I hosted for a while, and it was on camera, and I enjoyed doing it.
Was it strictly New York local, or?
No, it was network.
It was network.
And then I also did a lot of documentaries there. That Vietnam Requiem I did at ABC. This was after I'd left CBS.
Well, now that I've mentioned it, here is Peter Thomas on ABC.
This biblical story about helping one's fellow man seems to be a favorite of young artists. This may be purely coincidence, or it may point to the wisdom on the part of children.
All right, the ABC experience, and we'll get to a few others in a few moments, but right now, I just want to bring our viewers up to date on the march of technology that you have certainly seen, I have seen. Being in radio news as I was for 25 years in New York, I saw an evolution on technology and equipment.
Right.
You were seeing it in the recording studios, in the commercial and agency places all around New York.
Right.
But when you first started doing commercials right after the war, there was no audio tape as such at the time. That's the discs.
That was the big disc. And even with the Hamilton Watch Company, with an orchestra and a girl singer, they would say 5, 4, 3, and then you'd see the engineer just before we start put that diamond cutter on the disc. And they would give you the cue. And I remember the orchestra would go, first a tick-tock, tick-tock, that's the Hamilton Watch Company, and then the music, and I would come on and say, "The passage of time is beyond our control, but it passes beautifully when a Hamilton marks the hour." Then the girl would sing, "Was it a dream, was it a dream?" And then she would sing a song, I'd read a poem, "How do I love thee, let me count the ways." And if somebody made a mistake, if I made a mistake, or one of the musicians made a mistake, back to the top.
Yes.
And that was before tape. And with tape, as you know, they could cut it up. But at that time, you worked in those days if you didn't make mistakes. The most difficult narration was medical. and love doing medicals. And you had to do it without making mistakes because it's too laborious going back, you know, starting over.
We used to do a lot of medical at a studio that you and I are familiar with in Stamford, Connecticut.
P&P?
P&P Studio.
John Fishback.
Yeah, John Fishback.
Great guy,
and the
yeah.
reason that a few of us got as much work as we did, like Eddie Bryce, a
Rich.
soap opera actor,
Right.
we were very facile with these huge medical names.
That's right.
And you had to be.
I got a Dorland's dictionary when I first went to, because I asked an engineer at Rees, I said, what is the most difficult narration you have? Oh, medicals, he says, and Scorby can do it, and one other guy. And so I got a Dorland's dictionary and familiarized myself with all these names.
Oh, yeah.
And it helped.
And there's something else. But then, can you remember a year or a time when you walked into a studio and all of a sudden there was something called tape, audio tape?
It wasn't that incredible.
Well,
it really was.
Yeah, it was a quantum leap. We just thought it was the wonder of the age.
We did, but
What
it's
was
gone.
that, the 50s for you?
The 50s, yeah, the
Yeah.
50s. And I in fact remember the man who invented it was a guy named Joe Tall, and he was a CBS engineer, and he was the one who developed the tape. Remember the little tape cutter?
Oh, the little, yeah.
And he would slice
Oh,
up
yeah.
all the tape.
45-degree
Yeah.
angle, I guess it was, for
Yeah.
that razor blade.
And how we had some real technicians who could go really fast, cutting it up. It was wonderful.
And of course, I guess tape was it for decades.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then we started to get into really high tech and
Right.
into this thing called DAT.
DAT and the ISDN. And now it's the computer. They put it on a file down. I do all the forensic files. No DAT, no tape, no ISDN.
I know it.
It's
I know
into
it.
the computer, goes to Allentown, Pennsylvania. They download it, and it's on the air.
This must have been at least 16, 18 years ago.
Right.
I was in New York doing a commercial for Potemkin Cadillac, and we kicked the door open to the booth at one point, you know, take a break
Right,
or they
right.
want to talk to me about something, and I looked at the young fellow on the board and I said, I don't see any tapes rolling. Now, mind you, this is 18 years ago.
Right, right.
And he laughed at me. He says, you're in here. You're in the board. And that was the start of that age.
It was
And
incredible.
that's all you've seen since, right?
Yep, and of course the teleprompter is another thing. Used to be, when we first got the teleprompter, it used to be to the side of the camera.
Now it's right on the
Now
camera.
it's right on, so that people can look right in and it looks
Yeah.
as if they're just doing it ad lib.
Absolutely. So when in your life were you able to start doing a lot of work at home? Because I assume you did a lot on that very, very high quality telephone line that came into being, maybe back in the 70s or 80s, from your home in Greenwich, yes?
Not in Greenwich.
No?
I used to get on the train every day to go to New York. But
Okay.
in Naples, I started going to, when I was doing Estee Lauder when it all started, and they called from New York, they needed a pickup line. And there were no recording studios because in 1966, 67 in Naples. So I went to the local radio station. And of course, Howard Schwartz called up, said, there's no way we can use this.
Wow.
Patch it in. Its quality is not used. So
Right.
I said, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
He said, you're going to have to put it in a little studio. So he sent down some engineers, and they put it in and flew back to New York. And I put a Neumann mic and a board, an English board, and 2 tapes decks, which are all gone, as you know.
Oh, yeah. The
And,
Neumann mic, that
yeah.
was the Cadillac.
That's a Cadillac.
Yeah.
So I was able to do that from my home in Naples. And then ISDN I decided not to do because I felt, Don, that you can only do one thing at a time. And I didn't want to concentrate on things going around with counters and where I'd rather concentrate on the script. So that's the reason I'd rather go to a studio than home. But I still do auditions and DATs from my studio.
You're still doing DATs?
Still do, but DATs, but that's all I can do in my studio because they won't accept tapes or cassettes.
No.
But they will send up a DAT and they can take it to a studio and have it transferred. But they don't like to, you know.
I just want to refer for a moment, and I assume as our viewers are sitting here listening to your voice, and that was the big reason to get you into this studio, so that viewers could hear finally and see finally the man they've been listening to on, and not even realizing, oh yeah, it's him again, it's him
Yeah.
again. Some of the articles that have been written about you, and of course they're all very highly complimentary. This Wall Street Journal story of February 17th of this year, titled, "So Much More Than a Voice." His are the pipes that launched 1,000 pitches. And it's not even 1,000, it's thousands. IBM, American Express, Coca-Cola, Exxon, Alaska Airlines, United Technologies, I've done some nice work with them, Visine, Hewlett-Packard, and to the disgust of his wife Stella, who thought it completely infra-dig, mentholatum deep heat rub.
It was an on-camera thing, and some guy was rubbing some mentholatum on something, and
Yeah.
she thought that was bad taste, and I should never have done it.
Hey, you know what?
Everything has to be cleared with Stella.
When
After 58 years.
When I see actors and actresses doing commercials for various bodily functions on
Right.
TV, which were not very acceptable even 20, 30 years ago. You didn't talk about those problems, whether
Right.
it's hemorrhoids or
Right,
constipation.
right.
But now I see them on, and I just shake my head and I say, hey, you know what kind of money these people are making?
Right, right.
And you know what? If their friends kid them about it, they don't care.
They don't care. That's right. That's exactly
Because
right.
when that check comes in, and that thing runs for 13 weeks or a year, give me a fast run through of some of your name, like I just mentioned, Coke and IBM and Exxon and the rest, the years in which you were a spokesman for, say, Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola I did for about 25 years, starting in the early 50s with McCann Erickson. Then I did, the early 50s, Atlas Bucron Tires, Esso, before it was Exxon, and Schaefer Penn in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was doing soap operas, you know, Young Dr. Malone, Aunt Jenny's Real Life Stories, things like that. It was an exciting period, but it was before color and before the teleprompters. And there was and you go on stage. I remember Art Hannes was doing Toast of the Town.
That's the Ed Sullivan Show.
The Ed Sullivan Show, and he was going on vacation, and he said, Peter, would you do my job? I'm going to go to vacation. And that was quite an experience to stand on that stage with a full audience, and on all the shows. And I remember in Revlon, that I saw Hal Tulchin on the street in New York last year, and he said, Peter, you know, we did the $64,000 challenge. I did the commercials for Revlon.
Is that Hal March as the MC?
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
And he said to me, if we told people today what we did then, they wouldn't believe it, because we were on stage live. The Revson brothers would sit in the front row for the show, and your earphones would be on, and he would say over the phone, while I'm reading this thing, Moondrops by Revlon. Pete, you got to pick me up 5 seconds, 5 seconds.
Oh,
and
yeah?
you kept right on going. You couldn't make a mistake.
No.
And live.
Mm-hmm.
No going back.
Mm-hmm.
It was exciting.
A great school.
Yeah.
A great school. What are some other accounts that you had for 6, 7, 8, 10 years?
American Express, I did that for about 15 years. To apply for a card, the American Express card, don't leave home without it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I got that because I could do it in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
I've forgotten the director's name, but I was I was going through Ogilvy one day, and he said, hey, can you read this in 5 seconds? I got my stopwatch out, and yep, he said, I got the job. Stay with it 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then IBM, helping people find the answers. That was for about 8 years. Listerine, the taste people hate, twice a day. That was about 14 years. You kept accounts a long time.
Yes.
Then United Technologies and Textron. There've just been so many exciting commercials.
And one spot that you couldn't come up with a kind of an archive copy on it for us that you're heard now quite often is Siemens.
Siemens, that's right. And I couldn't find that commercial, but
That's okay.
I did it for years, and
Yeah.
they came over from Germany.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it was very good.
But I just hope viewers are sitting here absorbing the
Yeah.
voice they're listening to, because it brings back, I'm sure it will bring back a lot of, like, people are sitting there now saying, oh, yes,
I remember that.
I know that. Yeah, now I know that voice. Of course,
right, right.
course. Yeah. But let's go to a couple of the documentary shows that
Good.
you've been associated with, that you were nice enough to bring us pieces of. And for a minute or so, this is Peter Thomas for the History Channel.
Some American warplanes and aircraft carriers are on their way home. The war in Iraq is entering a new stage. Meanwhile, there are looming questions about other countries that may pose a threat to America and the rest of the world. One of them is Iran, whose government is reportedly on the verge of producing nuclear weapons and has long been suspected of supporting terrorists. This week, Secretary of State Powell said there is no plan to attack Iran.
There you go. And if the envy is showing on my face, it should. Because there are 1,000 of us out there that would kill to do a History Channel narration.
Thank you so much.
And there you are. But when you hear the way you treat words, I want to say that if I can find it right away. Listen to this. This is from the Naples Daily News 2 years ago. Narrator Peter Thomas has a voice that spans generations. It's a measured, reassuring, emphatic voice that enunciates each word clearly, and I can't even say enunciate, and pauses in all the right places for dramatic effect. A confident, practiced voice. It should be. He's been the voice of big band, of radio and TV news, PBS documentaries, film commercials, guided listeners through stories, etc. But it talks about that reassuring, emphatic voice. And every time I hear you, and invariably I'll turn to my wife and I'll say, there's Peter. And it's Nova or the History Channel or whatever you've done, or one of the 100 commercials you probably have running right now. And the word I've often used to describe your voice is mellifluous. It rolls, it flows.
Thank you.
It just fits so easily into the mind and the ears of the viewer on television. And obviously that is the key to your longevity, because it hasn't slowed down a bit.
It's wonderful. It really is.
And the voice hasn't changed.
No, the voice. I did a Gettysburg pickup. They called me. It was an auto tour of Gettysburg Battlefield.
Yes.
And they had 2 direction changes, and they said, Peter, we have to do 2 paragraphs, but the only thing we're worried about is you did this 30 years ago. And I said, well, send me the tape, and we were able to match it.
Yeah.
The voice hasn't changed, which is a blessing.
It is a blessing, and I'm kind of grateful in that respect
too,
because
right.
I've been doing this for a few years, half a hundred.
I know you have.
And it's still running. It's still
still
working.
going.
And by the way, I go to Gettysburg often. About every 2 years, I go to a week on the campus called the Civil War Institute.
Wonderful.
And naturally, we always go back to the battlefield. I never get tired of walking those fields where Pickett's Charge took place and everything else. And we get the cassette at the various souvenir shops.
Right.
And we put it in the car player,
right.
and we listen to Peter Thomas telling us all about Gettysburg.
Gettysburg. That's right. That's it.
And how long ago did you say you did that?
30 years.
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yeah. And I heard it just a year ago.
Right, right. It goes on and on, which is amazing.
I said to whoever I was with, probably a carload of 3 or 4 of us, I said, you hear that guy? He doesn't change. It's just the way it's always been. I want to show you something that you should be justly proud of. August 7th, 2004. I'll hold it up here, and we'll get a real nice tight shot on it as we go further into the program. But this is Peter, 80 years old, wearing, and if I go all the way down the page, and we will when we get it on full camera, wearing a Purple Heart. If we can regress back to the invasion. Do you remember how many days into the invasion it was when you, quote, got the Purple Heart? I
got the Purple Heart in the Battle of the Bulge. I went through France, Belgium, Holland, into Germany, Aachen, Hürtgen Forest. But it was, and the Battle of the Bulge started, let's see, December 16th, 1944, when the Germans came through, surprised us all on an 80-mile front.
Right.
But I was wounded on the 27th of December with shrapnel, and that's paper called me up and said, do you have a Purple Heart? I said, yep, we'd like to take a picture of it, because it was Purple Heart Day, that they have a commemorative stamp. And a friend of mine, Frank Johnson, was there. He's on that same page. He has 3 Purple Hearts, but all I remember was the coldest winter for a Florida boy to be the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's right, because you know, until today I didn't realize that you were a native born Floridian.
Native Floridian.
So many of us are, you know,
from somewhere else.
Immigrants.
That's right. That's right.
They come in from up north or the Midwest or wherever. And your friend here, that you said was wounded 3 times, 3 Purple Hearts.
3 Purple Hearts.
And had surgery without anesthesia?
He was shot by a sniper 10 days after D-Day, and he told his squad, he was first lieutenant, he said, I order you back. He said, I'm dying. And when then the Germans came, and they operated without anesthesia because they had no anesthesia. So they had to take his lung out, and he survived. He survived. He's also been president of 3 universities and one of the greatest guys I've ever known. He's an author too. He writes, Frank Johnson. Great guy.
Yeah, I see his picture here in the paper. We'll show that later too. Here is, tell me about Water's Journey. What was that all about? This is a
that was a state of Florida showing how the aquifers work and how precious they are going under the state, you know. And I did that for a film company in Jacksonville, and it was just marvelous. In the studio while I did it were the people who were going through the aquifers.
Oh.
And they would show what was above and what was underneath, and how important it is that we protect these aquifers instead of throwing trash and everything.
When you say they were going through, you mean physically going?
Physically, and frogmen, and they were just the most dedicated people I have ever known. And if something happened where one of them lost air or got trapped, the orders were the other one goes, because if the other one tries to save the other, they'll both of them.
Oh boy!
But
boy,
it's a good film.
Well, here it is. Let's watch a piece of it right now. This is Water's Journey. Peter Thomas.
Earth is described as a water planet, and without a doubt, water is our most important resource. All living things depend on the natural cycle of water. It is the essence that gives us life.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. And we're going to back it right up with another piece of video, a documentary you did, which is a subject ever present in Florida, and very dear to, I think, everybody. You don't have to be a native Floridian to love the manatee.
It's another wonderful, and I did this in Florida, and it was wonderful.
What would you put a date, a year on this?
Last year.
Just last year?
Just last year.
Okay. Here he is, talking about and telling you about the manatee.
This is the manatee, the Florida manatee, a subspecies of the West Indian manatee, and a relative of the manatees of the Amazon River and West Africa, and the dugongs of the Indian and Pacific Oceans.
Okay, some of your documentary work. The nova that we saw at the outset, you said was what, your favorite, or maybe the best one?
I think that Stella, my wife, that's her favorite. When I said I was going to be down here, she says, take the Iceman. She loves this narration, right? I've just done another one last week for them, Stone Age Man, the Clovis Spear Point, which they thought was the oldest point in our development on this continent. But they found now that we were here a lot longer. And they even think the Solutreans from France came over on the icebergs. It's a fascinating nova. It's going to be on, I think, around election time.
They're always excellent.
They're excellent.
Those novas.
They're just terrific.
Yeah, but now, where do you have to go to do a nova these days?
I used to have to take a plane up to Boston.
Yeah, because it was
that's WGBH.
Yes.
WGBH on Western Avenue, and then, but I'd get the film weeks in advance, and I would read it to Stella, and we would talk about it and look at the film, and then fly up there and do it. Now, we were just talking about technology.
Yeah.
Now they don't care. They said, "Oh, just do it in Naples." So they got on they direct up from Boston, and it's all done over the line. You know, downloaded.
Is it from home?
No, it's from a
studio. It's from
that
you go to in Naples.
Nevco Studio.
Nevco Studio.
Right, and they do it there, and it's all sent up to Boston from there. But they do such magnificent work. They really do.
Well, we've got some more things here to look at. This VO, I get a big kick out of, because I have done a few things in the space program in reportage in my time. And it's become almost a consuming effort in my life at the moment. But back in the days when the space program first hit the headlines and the Mercury 7 astronauts became America's Boy Scouts and overnight heroes, walked on water, a couple of products came to prominence. And all of a sudden, their names became synonymous with space. And one of them was, and we'll watch this Peter Thomas commercial for a lovely drink called Tang. Watch this.
Most people know that orange-flavored Tang is the energy breakfast drink. Has rich, natural taste, even more vitamin C than orange juice. But Tang also develops a sense of responsibility. No one should leave in the morning without his vitamin C. fact is, Tang was chosen to go to the moon with the Apollo astronauts. Tang, as nourishing here on Earth as in outer space.
Everything you ever wanted to know about Tang. Was that necessarily a development of the space program? I don't think so. It wasn't developed for the space program. It just happened to be adopted by.
And they went to the moon. Tang went to the moon, and they capitalized on that. Young and Rubicam.
Some people think Teflon was a space thing, but it wasn't.
No.
DuPont invented it in the 1930s.
Right.
But Velcro, that's something else.
Right.
That was a space program thing. Here, this is interesting because this will give us a nice little montage, as I understand it, Peter, of an interview that was done with you as the subject, as the guest, and it's going to give us a mix of some of your work about 25 years ago.
Right.
So let's watch this, maybe a couple of minutes, okay?
Peter Thomas is known for his voice.
I do Coca-Cola. I've been doing that for about 25 years, of the voice of Coca-Cola. And oven fries on right now.
Peter Thomas is at the top of his profession. He's a freelance narrator and makes his full-time living providing the voice for some of the top commercials and films.
The taste people hate twice a day, Listerine. That was on all their commercials. And let me see some of this. Well, IBM, helping people find the answers. Or we're United Technologies. And Coca-Cola would be, have a Coke, you know, just at the end, or there's nothing like a Coca-Cola. So it just depends. They vary on commercials because when you do so many, the trick is to not be the same voice because you're not selling your voice, you're selling the product. So you sort of get so involved in the product, a different voice comes out of it. Your Exxon dealer, thanks for stopping by. Your Exxon dealer, or Exxon, something like that. Changes a little bit, you know. But there have been a lot of one-liners. Pillsbury, when you want to bake your best, bake Pillsbury's best, you know. Or Peter Paul, I did Peter Paul Mounds, indescribably delicious, you know. Those are some of the one-liners.
I just knew you weren't the Pillsbury Doughboy.
No, that's right, Roger.
Okay, very, very good. And what else have I got here that I want to call on? I think we might have about done it. No, not really. One more time, folks. Gee whiz, how many on-cameras spokesperson work jobs do you think you've done in your career? Do you ever keep count of this type of thing?
I've never kept count of the on-camera ones, you know.
Mm-hmm. Dozens.
You're right, dozens.
Dozens. And voiceover, you know, I said 1,000, or one of the newspaper articles said 1,000, and I don't think that's even close.
I think you're right.
Because I've known you too long, and I've never known you not to be busy.
That's right. I've been very blessed. I really have. I love it.
So, and this latest evolution is so wonderful, as your wife said to you, you know, going into your 80th year.
Right.
My goodness, most of us are. In fact, when I get to be 80, if I get to be 80, I'll probably be ready to put my feet up. I don't know.
Stella says, when there's an audition, she says, don't go in person, Peter. Just send them your tape or your voice. You know?
Yeah.
Because if you walk in, they'll say, at 80, because you look around today in the auditions, and all of the people are very young, you know.
I know it. I'll even quote her from the Wall Street Journal last February. She said, "Hey, Mabel, here's the guy. He's an old geezer, and who's recognized in restaurants and grocery stores as soon as he opens his mouth. So don't throw in the picture and spoil anything. But no, you have nothing to worry about in that sense. But however, this is a business that belongs to the young.
To the young, that's right.
You know, and if it belonged to those of us up there, we'd probably be doing a lot more voiceover than when we do see, and we don't.
That's right.
But when you've got a voice as youthful and as same-o as yours has been for 50 years.
It's amazing. I'm so appreciative, and I thank God for that blessing, you know.
Yeah. And what's a typical week in Naples like for Peter Thomas these days?
Well, I just did 6 narrations on the great battles of the past for the History Channel. I did a Nova last week. I did, the Forensic Files, and then political. And this is a very busy political season. Last night I did one for George Bush about wolves. It had a very beautiful scene in the woods, and they're talking about our country's in a very dangerous time now.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then the wolves are attacking, referring to the John Kerry slashing the intelligence budget by $6 billion. We're getting into politicals. I was just doing the voiceover. You know.
Okay, and you're going back to it?
They said probably they'll call. I'll call my wife and they'll say, "How soon can you get back to the studio?" Because many times you have to go back. Somebody will change something or decide they want a different interpretation. Because I do candidates in Texas and Oklahoma, New York, all over. You know.
When I did a few spots in New York back in the '80s, I guess it was, worked for the man now very, very well known for his. Being at the helm of Fox News, and that's Roger Ailes.
Oh yeah, I know Roger Ailes. Yeah.
And that was National Studios.
National Studios.
I think they shot the film Tootsie there too, didn't they?
Right.
I think they used it for exteriors
that's
or something with what's his name coming out.
And that was owned by the Lustig brothers, the two Lustig brothers on West 42nd Street, the National.
Are there any occasions you keep talking about Nevco and going up there to do the forensic files? How long? What, a few minutes from your house?
7 minutes with no stoplights to get to Nevco from my house.
Isn't that nice? Even during snowbird season?
Yep. It's
not too bad?
It's a back way. But you know the thing I really miss, and I dream about this at night, I miss New York. And I spent so many years there. Then I will wake up and tell Stella, you know what I was dreaming of New York, going up Fifth Avenue or Sixth Avenue, going to Times Square, taking the subway this way, all over New York. And when you've done it for like over 50-some years, it becomes a part of you, you know.
Sure does.
And I love New York.
Only did it for 25.
But you know what I'm saying. It becomes a part of you, you know. And the way they do things in New York, it's fabulous.
Now, is there any occasion, and see, here's where I probably have given myself a wrong impression. I could just see you sitting there in the house and banging out a lot of this work, but apparently not that much.
No, mostly just I go to the studios, either Blue Sky or I go to Nevco or Robert George Productions. There are 3 very good studios.
All in the Naples area?
All in the Naples area.
That's a very active marketplace.
Yeah, it really is. And there's another man by the name of Mike Carroll who's a voiceover person. He's down there. He does an awful lot of work, too.
Well, you dropped some names, Peter, and you're going to have some viewers writing things
All right,
down.
okay.
What did he say? What did he say? What was the name of that person? What was your name? Here's something that's very, very nice. I wish you would tell us more about this, if you would. This is the Naples Sun-Times. This is probably, what, a weekly?
Yes.
It was the March 17th issue of this year, serving Naples, North Naples, and that area and so forth. And we'll also give you a nice full screen shot of this, but you have on the I guess what you would call
made me
that.
an honorary doctorate.
I'm trying to think of the garb that you have on, the gown, that like a graduate or you know, someone receiving a degree. And this is no exaggeration. You're identified as legendary narrator Peter A. Thomas, congratulated by friends at the Ritz-Carlton in Naples on March 11th, when you were. The proclamation was issued. Peter Thomas recognized as the International College 2004 Humanitarian. What was that all about?
Well, one of the things that I've been able to do in Naples, and I love doing it, is working for so many different organizations, the Red Cross, Immokalee, Matthews, St. Matthews, and I will do films for them and speak, and they felt that I had contributed a lot and wanted to give me this award, which is, I've never had anything like this in my life. It was just incredible. And they made a film on my life, and Marcia Savala in New York recorded it, and they put it, the picture, and it was wonderful. Just
they made a film of your life. Did they show it anywhere?
They showed it at that occasion.
That's all?
Yeah, that's at
they
that
should
occasion.
Put it on PBS.
Yep. Well, it was just wonderful. It was just we had to go rummaging through old trunks to find pictures of my parents, because my parents came from Europe, and so I had to get my mother's trunk out with her pictures and her aunt's pictures and my dad's pictures, and they put it all together and made just a magnificent film.
Now, what about the Peter Thomas family? I happen to know this personally. There's a couple of younger Thomases out there in the business. What about those fellows?
Peter Jr., he's in Arizona. He does voiceovers and he writes. And Doug lives in Greenwich, And I think his latest is Duracell, and he's done PBS. And he's both of them are excellent. They really are.
The acorn doesn't fall
far from
the tree.
They grew up, I guess, with this around them.
And I have had the pleasure of working with both your sons back in Stamford, Connecticut, and they were delightful.
They're wonderful guys.
Nice young men.
Oh, they really are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's getting us down here. I just want to quote a few things here in this. It's a great Wall Street Journal article called "So Much More Than a Voice." You're talking about being now into this court TV thing, the forensic files. Mr. Thomas spends at least 6 hours going over a script, rehearsing with his wife Stella, sometimes rewriting sections before going into the recording studio. You told me that most of the time your changes in the script are accepted, and that's a very high compliment.
You have to be very careful, as you know, when you go to a studio and the writer is there. You can't say, this is wrong.
No, you can't.
So what you say is, I'd like to do an alternate.
Oh, so isn't that...
wow, Paul Dowling is the producer and the writer. So, and he's a wonderful producer, wonderful human being too. But he is very happy with me when I do alternates. And he said to me one day, he said, Peter, you know, all your alternates pretty well get on the air. And he appreciates it because he knows how hard I work on it, and I analyze it and do different approaches on paragraphs.
Well, that's good. You're very fortunate because most writers take it
straight
up front. If you mess with their wonderful words, you put on
that's exactly right. You have to be very diplomatic and very careful because you can't hurt somebody's feelings.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. But if you just talk the way you're talking to me now, I don't see how anybody could be offended.
Thank you, Don.
It's that mellifluous sound again.
Thank you,
and
Don.
as long as we're talking about Peter Thomas's current project, take a look and listen to Peter Forensic Files right here. There you have it. That brings you up to speed, up to date, and I think we have accomplished. I certainly hope I've tried to show our viewers,
I think
introduce you to them.
It's been wonderful.
And I think far too many years have gone by without someone tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, come on, we want to introduce the TV audience to you. And we have a wonderful audience here in this Gulf Coast section of Florida, from Bradenton on down into Northport and Port Charlotte and areas like that. And initially this program will be seen quite a few times here on Channel 21 in Bradenton, METV, and then again down on Channel 20 in Sarasota. And we are very, very grateful to them both. And I mentioned some of the people who preceded you on these cameras, under these lights, and it's just a nice story to keep telling. Now you are, I'm trying to do a fast one, exactly 80, Peter?
80 this last June 28th.
Last June 28th. At a point where most people would be retired at least 15 years.
Right.
And in this day and age, I'm running into more and more young people who have found it possible to kick, throw the equipment back into the locker room at 55. Now you're 80.
80.
I get the feeling you have no intention of slowing down.
I enjoy every day. Every new script comes in. It's just fabulous to be able to investigate it, and it's a blessing every day to be able to get these scripts and communicate with people all over the United States and get involved, do your research. It's really a continuing education with documentaries, especially. You know, the commercials are a lot of fun, but the documentaries I take very seriously.
How much of this work these days, or ever in your career, has come to you almost just because it's Peter Thomas and they know where you live and they know how to get in touch with you, or how much of it had to come through an agent? Because we're talking New York, we're talking big-time clients here.
Well, like with Bob Drew, who was one of the finest documentary makers, or David Hoffman in California, they know me and they've worked with me, and they recommend me to certain people and they call and I work with them. But every now and then you get somebody new, or they've heard you on something. And I think that's important, to be able to keep things going so they can look at your work and decide, I'd like to use him, you know. But a lot of new people are still coming along, call up and ask me to audition or do something new.
Right.
But it's a fascinating business. It really is.
Well, we go back, you and I personally, you know, on those occasional meetings in New York or Connecticut, 25 years.
25 years, that's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
And the phrase was always thrown at us by people that you worked for, producers, studio owners, and the like, was the term "Get Peter Thomas."
Oh.
It's as old as our modern broadcast business, I guess, and isn't it wonderful? It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Don.
I'm thrilled that the ball just keeps rolling.
It's wonderful being here. Being with you, it's like old times, walking the streets of New York.
Yeah,
and thank you so much for having me today.
Much nicer walking the beaches of Florida, if you don't mind.
Right, I agree with you.
I prefer that. As we go out, we'll show you some photos, newspaper pictures of Peter Thomas, and we just might come up with another little piece of video or two that we haven't shown you in the program so far. But I wanted you to meet the gentleman who has become part of your life and mine for these many, many years. And it's been a real pleasure to have you here, Peter. Thanks again. So this is Don Blair for this time around on Broadcast Biographies. We'll see you again real soon. Thank you.